Hello everyone, lovers of papers, prints and white pages. I'm Gabriele Chiapparini, welcome to Small Photobook Cult. If you like our videos, please like them, leave comments and subscribe to the channel now. Today we will speak about a book with an incredible and mysterious name. I Saw a Tree Bearing Stone in the Place of Apple and PEARS. This is a captivating photographic project that delves into the transformation of ordinary objects into sacred relics. Drawing parallels with the Catholic Church's classification of relics, this book explores how a meteorite, initially mundane, become a cosmic relic once its celestial origin is revealed. Welcome to the episode 19 of Small Photobook Cult. We are here with the photographer Emilia Martin. Hello Emilia, I'm really happy to have you here in this episode of the podcast.
Hello Gabriele, I'm also really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. This book was suggested by Peter Pflugler, and it's the second time that I'm able to do a suggested book. And also, this book was on my list, so
yeah, so perfect. Nice. I actually got a message from Peter saying that he has super good experience talking on this podcast, and I know he was super happy, and he was like, "Oh, Emilia, I suggested you." I was like, "Oh, thank you so much. It's so sweet." Yeah,
Peter is a sweet guy. Yeah, it's true. And Emilia, do you want to introduce a bit yourself and also a bit what is this book about?
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah. So, my name is Emilia Martin, and I come from Poland originally. But I live in The Hague in the Netherlands since 2020. So I moved here to do my master's, and the master's is called Photography in Society. And it's this 2-year program. It was really great, and I did it during COVID, but luckily, actually, my school was the only one in the entire country that was not closed during COVID, so that was incredible. But yeah, I'm not originally from here. I'm originally from Poland. I come from southwest of Poland, which is very much heavy industry, coal mining region. And my parents moved there, when they were young, and they moved away from the countryside in the east of the country. And I often refer to them as first generation of migrants, even though, of course, I know it's quite troubled to talk about migration within one country. But the important thing is that at the time when they did move, it was actually strictly controlled because it was still under the Soviet ruling. And particularly my family, because they come from the countryside, east of Poland. It's very much rural farming land. So that was particularly not in an interest of the oppressor for people to leave this place, because of course that was a space where majority of the food to sustain the army and the country was produced. And it's very much a very kind of poor. The land is not poor, because the nature is incredible there and the soils are very rich, but because it's completely reliant on the farming industry, it is quite poor. And now it's mainly villages, and now it's very much becoming this place where it's cultures and people are leaving, people are locking the doors and leaving to move to the city because they cannot sustain their lives there anymore. Mm-hmm. Of course, not everybody, but as a general trend. So that's kind of where my roots are. And this place is really important to me because I really grew up in between of these two places. So even though I kind of was my mother would often kind of jokingly say that, oh, I'm the city child. I went to school there and kind of that's where my education was. But I spent every summer holidays with my grandma. My parents would just drop me there for 3 months. And I feel that's kind of where I developed artistically and also sensitivity. And I think it was also very confusing to grow up between these two places because there was a lot of tension. Maybe I'm going too deep too quickly, but so that is important. I'm not just saying this to overshare, which I sometimes tend to do, but I'm saying this because this like now at this point, it's very clear to me that this is a story that's very present in like all the works I do, and particularly in this work that we're going to talk about. I saw a tree bearing stones in a place of apples and pears with a very long title. Yeah, particularly here, like I never set out to make a work about anything personal, anything like family history related. But that was the second time, because also in the previous work that also happened when I kind of like set out to explore something big and universal. And actually I kind of ended up reflecting on this very kind of familiar, close and intimate to me like stories. So yeah, basically to say a few things about this book and this maybe work, first of all. So this work explores a meteorite. So the meteorite is kind of like the topic, but also the protagonist of this book. And I'm interested in meteorites as this kind of body that comes from a different space, like literally outer space. But also I'm particularly interested in meteorites as seen through myths and tales and legends. And also, yeah, maybe I don't want to go too deep too quickly, but to me, this is kind of this interesting idea. Also, like it's a way to talk about storytelling, because I see myself more as a storyteller than a photographer. And to me, this meteorite is also, in a way, like on one hand, a perfect vessel for storytelling, because it's this stone that kind of travels between different spaces and narratives, and it carries very different kind of stories to very different people. And maybe this we can go more in depth. Yeah, but it's also like a perfect vessel for me to talk about like bigger things, or like more philosophical or existential things, I guess. I think maybe that's not the most simple introduction, but let's start with this.
The title is powerful, mysterious, and unusual. How did you come up with it?
Thank you. Yeah, the longest title. How did I come up with this? I think I was struggling for quite a long time with this title. In the past, I often would rely on like titles from something that I read, or yeah, like some kind of like even tiny quote removed from the context. But with this work, I think the way it worked, I think at the time I was like writing quite a lot. So that's also an important element of my process. It's not just like, I think almost like writing and reading is like, it's kind of like the process of making of any work. And I wrote this poem about this. I just wrote it for myself. It was just like, like something when you're a bit stuck, I like to like do something small to like have a better understanding of what I'm actually doing. And I wrote this little poem, and there was this sentence in this poem, and it somehow made completely sense to me, because I think there's different levels why it made complete sense to me. I mean, on the first level, it was just intuitively. I was like, yes, this is the title. But on the other levels, I understand now that, of course, this is kind of relating to, like folk tales and like myths in which often nature represents something alive, or like the other way around, like nature has very much like this agency and is a protagonist. But on the other hand, it's also kind of like, I don't know. I think it's more like this process of like having, like, so this is not literal in any sense. This is not relating to anything specific. To me, it's just like giving more the rhythm of the work. And it's kind of like already introduces the work as some kind of more like a folk tale or something magical or something that cannot be intellectually understood, but also like stylistically, it also like speaks about this. So it's like on double levels. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. We can also start to go through the book if you want.
Mm-hmm.
In this work, it seems that art can play a role in bridging the gap between like popular and academic knowledge.
Yeah, can you expand on this? Why do you think that?
Because it seems to be a work with an academic approach. Some pictures looks really like I don't know, the collection of the pictures that you can find in an academic book, really like specific and describing the objects. But in some other way, you also put a lot of like tales from, I don't know, the countryside or the popular places. I don't know if I can explain it better than this. Like it's look like.
No, I think I see what you mean, and that's a great compliment. So thank you as well. I think that's like a really good point, because to be honest, it completely reflects like where I was at while making this book. So I have just graduated from my master's, the ones that I mentioned earlier. And this master's was not strictly academic, but I think like at any master's, like you do get into this maybe more rigorous thinking. You know, you have to write your thesis, there's a lot of things that you have to be able to argument or like position. And so I was like in a space where I kind of was like very saturated with this, right? But at the same time, this is not like, to be honest, like naturally who I am. I really love research, but I think very quickly as I do research, I'm like actually extremely intuitive person. So I think to me, it's always like a little bit of the clash with these two things. But I think maybe what was really good for me at the time when I was working on this project is that exactly I was going through like this clash of these two things. On one hand, like leaving this institution and trying to form my thinking in like, oh, how do I feel about like, you know, this kind of like institutionalized way of thinking about art. And on the other hand, I think like I finally felt so free. I was like, wow, I can literally do anything I want, and I don't have to explain it to like a group of teachers or peers, even though of course I like always communicate my work with like my friends, etc. But it was very different. So yeah, I'm really glad to hear that this has translated. And I think, yeah, that is maybe the essence of this work in a way, that, yeah, on one hand, it is very intuitive and it is very playful. And I also like the modes that I use there are like really different. So like, I don't know, there's a lot of playfulness there. And at some point I would even like think like, oh, you know, like I am talking about meteorite, but like what right do I have to talk from the first person perspective of a stone? Like I'm not a stone. I cannot understand the stone or like, you know, how the stones are. And then I was at this residency and I found this like one huge rock, and I was just like going to this rock and I like really, I don't know, I feel like I really built a relationship with it. And then I would just spend
there is this
time.
rock in the book.
Yeah, it is actually in a book. Wait, is it in a book? Yeah, it's definitely in a book. I think it's like, I will not be able to explain this to you. But like, yeah, that's kind of like, yeah, I can point to it later. There's actually one photograph with this rock that's not in a book. Yeah, but it's this rock. It's kind of funny because it was actually in Tuscany, and that was a bit ridiculous because there's like literally no rocks in Tuscany, because like obviously like the entire region was under the sea, and so like a lot of the ground is like, you know, mixed with seashells, and so there's actually no rocks. And I was like doing this work about rocks, and then I don't know, I just found this like one huge rock in the field, and somehow it was like a miracle. So I would like go on the walks every day to this rock and yeah, do little different things and like really play with the idea of like, oh, what if I just lie on this rock for like, you know, like as long as I can. And I kind of like imagine I am looking at the world from this perspective of the rock. This rock is actually also the one on this photograph.
And this one.
Yeah, it's not this one, but this one is also there. And this one, yeah, I think I could say the same story about this one. This one, yeah, this is the rock. It's just like literally just a rock in a field.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think like there's also, it's not like that in this book there's just one way of thinking like this. It's not just that like the whole book is from the perspective of a rock, but I think to allow myself to like play with this different, almost like different narratives and like, you know, where do they take me, and to allow myself to be really like having fun, but also like I believe that this is like a very valid way of generating knowledge and a very important way of generating knowledge. And I think that's maybe, I think that's maybe something that I can often like detach from when I just do this kind of like research as in traditional understanding of the word, which of course research is not just reading books and writing. I think like lying on a rock is also research. But I think it's really important to me to like maybe play with all these different modes and like, and I think maybe the danger with this kind of work often is that, and it's just like something that I struggle or like have struggled in the past quite a lot, that I often do things and they do make perfect sense to me, like it's not that I'm just doing like poetic work for the sake of poetry. It's very clear to me that I'm talking about very like solid things, like things that, it's not just like, but that's kind of often the criticism or the misunderstanding that I come across, or like, I don't know, just like the way that my work is described. It's like, oh, it's dreamy and it's poetic. And at some point I started getting a bit annoyed with this not because it isn't, because I am very clear that my work is poetic and dreamy. Like I'm using this aesthetics consciously. So it's also not like, but what annoys me about this is that often this is a way of kind of maybe ignoring the meaning behind this, or like just diminishing it to like, oh, there's like, there's like serious work about real world and there's like poetic work. And this poetic work is often dismissed as something less of a value or less important. And so I think that's also not just in this particular book or project, but like in general, I think that's something that I refuse to accept and like kind of actively go against. So that's a very long answer to your question, but I think that's essentially why I would like navigate between something that's kind of more traditionally understood as research and something that's more, in my understanding, is more like an intuitive kind of, you name it, like artistic way of working. So I can then kind of, have kind of two things in one.
And how did you work in the research part?
It's quite hard to answer this question because to me, I often find it difficult to like divide where is the research part and where's the making part, because I think so often like, like making part is the research part and vice versa. And they like really blend. And so I didn't have like, like few months of research and then making. I mean, obviously first before I did anything, then I had to like reflect on this quite a bit. But so it's really hard to just like pinpoint it to one thing. What I just told you about with this rock, that's also something I consider research. I also would be like, just like reading loads of books about meteorites. But interestingly, even though they were important, I think the books that are actually like the most important for this work there's particularly this one book, I have it here. It's called Draw Your Weapons by Sara Santillas. And I was like completely obsessed with this book when I was working on this project. And what is so special about this book is that it's kind of like, so in this book, she writes about photography and she also writes about violence. And the way she constructed the book is, to me, how I think about images. And so basically, to give maybe like a very clear idea, like, so you would begin to read this book and there's like a paragraph and then there's another paragraph. And it seems like the paragraphs are completely disconnected at first. So she would like first write about something like historical about photography, like, but also very specific, like she works on a very specific archive. And then she speaks about violence. And it kind of in the beginning sounds like she's just like, it's just like this disconnected quote. But as you read the book, you do like the two very clear stories emerge. But I think what's so smart about this edit is that actually like the most powerful thing to me about this book happens in between of these two stories. So she actually like really weaves very powerfully this photography and violence and kind of like, but also the beauty of photography. And yeah. And to me, that was somehow extremely important, like this idea of like weaving these two ideas, but not in like an obvious way. And I don't know if this like translates, but I do really believe that like, so the way I work is like extremely obsessive. So I usually get this like one idea and I just like obsess about this. So like it would be like something that, you know, you kind of like think about all the time and you dream about, and that's how it would look in practice. And then somehow when you are in this state, like everything you're gonna see or read or think about, it's gonna filter through your obsession. So I do really believe that this is kind of, yeah, like everything is there, but like maybe not everything I can like, you know, explain or like even understand in my brain. And I think it's beautiful. And I think that's a huge power of art or photography or whatever you're working with. And I think actually that this tendency that we have, especially I feel in the West, in the art nowadays, to like kind of understand everything is very violent and very kind of omnipotent. And I disagree with this. I feel like I'm constantly going on tangents away from the books, from the book or like the meteorites. But
no, but don't worry.
You're welcome to stop me when I go too far.
No. It's okay. Now, what when I ask you about the process, like the research part, I mean, like also all that kind of things that are in between. Like, for example, the way you found some specific rocks or some specific pictures. Because also I think like of course there is a specific research part maybe in the start of a project, but then it doesn't finish in that moment. It's keep going, I think, through all the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so it started really innocently. It was genuinely, okay, so how it started, I was working on my previous body of work, which was called The Blue of the Far Distance, and that was my master's project. And in this work, I was interested in like disappearing night skies and also the mythologies behind this, because when you look at the history of looking at the night sky, like actually majority of major organized religions and pretty much like every culture is connected to observing the night sky. And yet now we are at the time where like the night skies are disappearing and it's like a huge environmental issue, but it's not being spoken about at all because it's kind of dismissed as this like, oh, you know, it's just this like poetic thing looking at the stars. We don't actually like why is this important? Anyway, so I was working on this project and then I somehow came across, first of all, I came across this guy in the Netherlands because I like that's when I started living in the Netherlands, and I came across this guy. I mean, the guy, like he's not alive anymore, but like he's called Izzy Isinger, and he built a planetarium in his house. And when you think about planetarium, you usually imagine like nowadays, like planetariums are more like these round objects, but that was literally like his ceiling. And like on his ceiling, he kind of recreated the universe as he knew it, which is kind of crazy. And to me, it was like absolutely fascinating because I was at the time questioning my relationship with photography. And I thought like, oh, there's something very similar in, on one hand, how I make photography and how this man made, you know, like the representation of the night sky. It's in a way also kind of like a photograph. And then from there, you know, like how you go when you are really interested in something, you like discover another person. And at some point, I like literally met so many men in the Netherlands who have like built planetariums in their houses, barns or farms or bedrooms. And so that's one story. But like what happened is all these men, and it's a complete accident, they all happened to collect meteorites. And because I was visiting them all around the country, you know, and I think they were so confused about this, you know, artist girl coming fascinated about their ceilings. And they were just so excited about me being excited that they also were showing me these collections of meteorites. And to me, that was really interesting because I don't know if you've ever seen a meteorite, but it's literally quite boring. There's like not much special about this object. I mean, some are like more pretty when you cut them or polish them, but actually most of them are just like literally like a gray or brown rock. But yet all these men had all these like incredible stories to share with me. And because I was reading this book that I mentioned earlier, the Draw Your Weapons book, which also there's like a quote about Christian relics. And the quote of the Christian relics is, so there's 3 types of Christian relics in Christianity. The first type is the body parts of a saint, so like literally a finger or a bone. And the second type is the things that the Christian saints have surrounded themselves with. So like, I don't know, a chair or bed sheet, something like this. And the third type of relics is any object, so anything can become this object, as long as it touches the body of the saint, and you can produce the Christian relic. So like even after the saint dies, you can like make a little hole in a tomb and like lower the object on a line or a thread, and when it touches the body of a saint, it becomes sacred. And I saw this analogy with this meteorites. I thought like, wow, all these men are telling me these incredible stories about these boring looking rocks, and they're kind of like carrying something mystical or like sacred coming from the other world. And that's literally how it started. But then, of course, I don't know. I don't often like have a very strong idea at the beginning of the project. It's just like very strong intuition and honestly just like curiosity. And then I kind of, the way I went about this particular work is I just kind of explore every possible direction. And it only became like, it's interesting because now I think you look at this book and I think it's very clear, like it's fairly clear what it is about. Like there's an introduction text in the beginning, there's a closing text at the end. It is framed in like a certain story. I don't think it's like an encyclopedia of meteorites. It's not like everything I came across. But it's interesting because the process of making it is not like this at all. I think like it's kind of like really going on like million different ways and trying million different things. And then it almost felt a little bit violent to just choose this final narrative. No, that's wrong to say I chose the final narrative. I didn't choose it. It kind of like became with time clear, like, okay, this is what it is about. Like this is kind of, you know. But yeah, I think the process is very much like a sinusoid. So like you start small, you go very, very big, and then you end actually quite small. That's how it was for me, at least with this work.
I like all the time when you start from a point and then that specific point just bring you to another one.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's like the magic that can happen. And I think that's what excites me most about doing this.
Sometimes I think that,
and I think photography is particularly good for this because you're interested, you come somewhere with a camera. It's like quite easy also to transport or whatever, and that's the biggest magic that happens there.
It seems like that people are doing the project in some way because they are like bringing us to the other point, to the new point.
Absolutely.
In the picture of this book that is all in black and white, you choose to use a lot of black and also a lot of white.
Yeah.
Why?
Interesting. There's like many different reasons. It's funny because I literally never took black and white photographs before. I was quite proud of, like, I would mainly photograph analog before, actually only analog. And I was quite proud of color in analog photographs because, yeah, it's quite difficult. It's like a difficult kind of technical, like skill set. And with this work, I kind of like completely rejected a lot of this way of thinking about photography as like almost craft. So I basically didn't use the camera that I always use, like always for years. And I just kind of like honestly used whatever camera I had available. There's like, I don't think equipment is so important here, but to me it's interesting that it's like kind of almost like a complete rejection of this. And black and white, I think there's different reasons. Like on one hand, on like the most literal kind of point is it did really help me to create like a uniform language and aesthetics. And I didn't want this work to be kind of like all over, because I think my way of thinking is already so all over that I need, that I can kind of like jump from one idea to another, that I do need something like I need quite strict, maybe not very strict, but I need some kind of frames for myself to navigate this. So that, I think that was the aesthetics. That's what aesthetics gave me. And another thing is like quite simple, that I did work quite a lot with archival images, and they are often black and white, or they're like, usually if there's color, they're like, no, most of the time it's black and white actually. And if there is color, then it's like usually quite bad, because it already went through like processes of scanning at the institution or whatever. So it just, I don't know, it just helped me to also create this kind of confusion. Because in this book, there's different types of images. So there's like images that I stage, like this one that we're looking right now. So I would either read something or discover something, or just like a story that spoke to me and I wanted to kind of visualize this. Or in the case of this particular image, I don't actually think there was like a particular legend or a myth. It was more the landscape itself that I knew. So I was on this research trip in Northern Ireland because it's basically a paradise for anybody who's into rocks. So I really wanted to go there. And then I discovered this cave, and I was just, I don't know, to me it was kind of like being inside this cave felt like I'm being inside the massive rock. And I just wanted to create there. So, but anyway, what I wanted to say is that in this book you have like stage images, you have archival images, you have images that are kind of in between. So like quite a lot of archival images are actually manipulated in the same way that I manipulate my staged images. And I use this word manipulate also quite consciously. I know it's like a very much, like in photography, people often like react allergically to this word, but I am being quite honest and open about this. And when I say manipulate, like that can mean so many different things. For example, I don't know, like even I think just the act of staging, but many of the photographs like this one, actually, it's not just one photograph, it's a layering of multiple photographs that I would take. And that's the same thing that I do with archival images. So some archival images are actually not as they originally are. So it's just like a tiny crop of maybe an image, or an image layered with an image that I made. There's like quite a lot of, and to me, this process is actually like, this part is the most interesting. Like the kind of, maybe a good word to describe it is constructing. It's not just like the act of like taking an image. I find this like to be just honestly like a beginning of the process. It's like, how do you then layer this to I don't know, almost create this kind of like a magical, magical something that is not what it is.
I found like a kind of affinity between the colors of the meteorites that are mainly, I think, black or white or something in the scale of gray
or brown,
and the choice of the black and white, as if you wanted like to bring the whole visual language to that rocks.
That's a beautiful thing to say, and I have never consciously thought about this. But again, like I said, I think when you are in this, like when you really allow yourself to go in this process, I do think that all these things resonate with each other, and that's completely possible. That that's where you end up, and maybe you don't need to understand everything, but that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a flow. Like you just go and what is this, Emilia? You choose to like to do some intervention on the pictures.
Yeah, this is a nice example. It's a funny one. So basically what happened here, I was at this residency and I maybe I will like focus particularly on the image. So in this image, what happens is it's like a layering of several images. So there's 2 images that are my own, and there's an image from the NASA archive of this like a night sky. If I'm completely honestly deconstructing this one, and I found this really funny because like, you know, I was like photographing. I think what was I photographing? I think I was photographing the night sky, and I was photographing like I think I was trying to photograph some like particular stars or something anyway. And then often when you like set up your camera, especially if you work with digital camera, you will in the beginning have this like kind of like crappy images where you like set up your like timing wrong or whatever. And I saw this one and I thought it was so funny because on one hand, to me, this is like very clear, like it fits narrative so well. And it's an image of, to me, this is like an image of like a meteorite kind of, you know, like going and then like changing its mind and like going the other way. But almost like it kind of looks like it's drawn by a child. And I love how naive it is. But at the same time, to me, I really love this because it's almost like a little bit of a fuck you to photography. It was kind of like, you know, to me, like this way of maybe giving myself freedom of like, yeah, like I don't need to like, just like, I don't know, be this person who like just goes around and takes this like perfect images to, yeah, like I think it's like, I have a complicated relationship with also beauty and like perfection in photography. And I think that was my way of kind of like liberating myself a bit from this in this image, but in general in this project. So yeah, that's what it is.
I want
Please
to
tell
speak
me.
just 1 second about the text, how you decide to put the text in the book, and also how you decide to put the text in some specific part. For example, this last part, it's really different from the other because you see it's like a stop motion picture on the right, seeing you like hugging this rock. And then there is this text on the left. And also in the text, there is a specific part that, wait, I will find it. It was here, I think. Yeah, this one. You wrote, I am precious for what you see in me, an apocalyptic tool of mass destruction adored by those who secretly fantasy on their own extinction. That is amazing. It's a text so beautiful. And one of my questions, it was also this, like meteors have also often been very frightening for like human being in general. And so to read this part of the text, because I think this work, it's really dreamy and but it's also a bit scary. There is this this dark and these things falling from the sky. And so what is this relation between this work and this feeling of be scared about these objects?
That's a really interesting question. I wonder, should I first maybe reply about the text in the book? Because that's like a big question already.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It was a bit too long.
No, that's totally fine.
Of course.
I love that.
Let's start from the text.
Okay, let me just start from the text. Okay, so I don't think I actually mentioned this, but I should mention this in the beginning. So the way I worked on this book, it's very specific process, and I think that's not to be ignored. That basically this work was a winner of Charta Award in 2023, I think. And that means like that is basically one of these awards that you win, and that means that you kind of get a book deal. So that meant that YOUGURT Editions will produce this book, and that I will work with their designer, Francesco Rombaldi, who basically is the owner of the publishing house. But the interesting thing is that the work was not finished when it won the award. It was already at this point, like it was like very rounded, and it was like very clear, but it was still not finished. Like I still didn't have all the images. So that's maybe like also important to mention in the process. And then for a year, we worked with Francesco to like, work on edit, but also like the concept. And the important thing is that one of the first thing that like I ever said to him, and he's kind of like making this a bit into a joke now. When we met, I was like, I don't want to make just a photo book. Because I think there's so much going on. There's like also text, and I mean at the end you can easily say that it is a photo book, and it's not like not to like diminish the power of photo books in any way. I love a good photo book, but I think that's like one of the first things to mention that is quite important, and I think maybe that's why text does play a really important role in this. I think actually text plays as important role as photographs. So when I was talking about this book of Sarah's and T.S. where she edits the text, where kind of like the real magic happens in between, that was kind of the aim here. So like the way that we edited text. Okay, maybe there's also first good to mention what types of text is there. So there's like 3 types of text. There's 2 essays in the beginning and the end of the book. And these essays I wrote as kind of like an introduction, but also like a closing, like wrapping up. And they are quite literal, like quite standard text, which like introduce you into what the focus is. And the one at the end speaks about, it kind of like brings in them. There's this, basically I came across this story where 300 people working in a field, kind of late, like towards the end of 18th century, 300 people worked in a field and they saw a meteorite shower, and they freaked out because, obviously they were like, like people from the countryside working until late night hours, and they saw a meteorite falling from the sky, which was not supposed to happen according to science. Because science didn't acknowledge meteorites at this point. And then they reported it to the police, and then the police reported it to the scientific body. And the response of the scientific body, which I included here in this text, is like, oh, how sad that all these 300 adult men and women believe in their folk tales to the point that they actually like think they see things that are not there. Which to me is kind of like the point of this whole book of like, the question of who has the right to tell the truth and who doesn't. And like the entire history of meteorites is actually the history of, juggling this kind of question of like who has the right to tell what is magic and what is like scientific fact. Because meteorites, obviously now we know they're scientific fact, but like for centuries, they were completely ignored by science, not just ignored, but actually ridiculed. And I'm not criticizing science here. I'm just criticizing this kind of way of thinking like, oh, who has the right to truth and who doesn't. And the people who didn't have the right to truth in this conclusion are people who were native to lands or peasants working long hours, such as, like my ancestors, basically. And they were also, ironically, the people who were the main witnesses of meteorites, because they were the people who were not, in like cities in the fancy buildings working under the roof, but they were like for the long hours under the bare sky. So they were like also the witnesses, which also makes a meteorite like particularly interesting as like a historical kind of observation, because it was observed by people who were not listened to. So their stories lived through myths and legends and folk tales. Which is basically kind of what this work is about. So what we have here is these 2 texts that are essays that I just introduced, and then there's a lot of like what you're looking at now. So they're archival texts. So they are like literal quotes from like different texts or legends, or mainly reports actually, that I came across that are dated from before the time when the meteorite was like officially acknowledged. But actually not all of them. And they're all like kind of different sources, and they're very tiny cuts. So you don't get like the whole story, but like all these kind of quotes have this, to me, they're very, they're like images, for example, there's like a story of like one little girl who saw a meteorite lying on the ground and she was, I don't know, terrified. There's like another story about the man whose sheep guided him towards the hot rock, this kind of like, to me, they're very much like images. And that was actually one of the biggest struggle, I would say, to like edit them in the book. To like kind of edit them as images, but also obviously like text has its own kind of format. And so there's that, and then there's also the text at the end that you mentioned, and that's a poem that I wrote. And I mean, it's a poem, but I also like, to me, it's kind of like literally, that's what I meant earlier when I was talking about research as also like a way of like imagining like something else, like almost like me becoming a rock and then like speaking from the first person perspective of a rock. So yeah, this rock is telling, like, it's kind of, to me, it's whispering, it's wisdom towards the end. And it's very kind of, to me, this rock is very much like, it speaks as the matter of truth. So it is a poem, but to me, it's very much like a matter of truth. Like this poem says like, oh, you know, I'm a fantasy of those who fantasize about mass destruction. And that is kind of like a reference to, you know, all these films with like Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of fantasizing about, I mean, not fantasizing, Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, you know, like saving the humanity from like the falling meteorite, or like also kind of a reference. I don't really want to talk about like Elon Musk in this work at all, but like it is a reference to this kind of like, you know, obsession with kind of meteorite as this like mass destruction kind of tool. But it is like the way I wanted to do it was like never to like, I don't know, like directly link this to this man. It was much more to me to be like, yeah, like take the perspective of a rock and play with this and be, but also like there's, I find something very like raw in this. Maybe, I don't know. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah. And then there is the frightening part.
The frightening part. Interesting, because I would never think about this. It's quite hard for me to answer, but I think maybe what I would call it is more like mystique part. I mean, it is obviously frightening in a way, especially when you think about like, you know, like the history of meteorites, like most of the time they fell, and like, you know, imagining the situation where like science is actively like ridiculing this, like this is not possible. And of course you're like terrified. And like myths and legends are often guided by these principles of like teaching us how to relate to nature. Then when you think about this, you know, like when meteorite falls from the sky, it's clearly like a, you know, like maybe like a bigger force is communicating something or like punishing you or whatever, which is also the how these stories were interpreted. So like often you would have these tales that I would come across where like people, I mean, they're not tales, but like that's what how people reacted to meteorites. They would like either be terrified of this as like, you know, like sent by Satan, or they would think it's sent from God and they would like powder it and eat it. Or often these meteorites were often like kind of central points for communities where people would like, you know, like treat it as their like deity now, or like a goddess or whatever, and they would put it in a center and they would go there to grieve or celebrate or whatever, which is another element. Actually, I don't like, but it's another element that I was also kind of reflecting about, how the moment when kind of we said like, oh, meteorites did, you know, they're like scientific fact and they do fall from the sky. Then they kind of like immediately were moved to like museums, which is also quite violent when you think about it, because they did belong to like different communities for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment they were like acknowledged as this like, then they kind of had to like, suddenly like people had the right to remove them from where they were for like such a long time. And so I don't know. I don't really have the answer to like what is scary. It's I like it that you see it there. I never wanted this to be like kind of, you know, to kind of I want this to be a bit unsettling, maybe. Maybe that's the
but
and it is quite unsettling. Like this history is really unsettling. Like not in like saying like, oh, this is right, this is wrong, but just like in a way of looking at this as quite complicated history of how we as humans project, what we call knowledge onto objects. And
but I think like my feeling come also from like my childhood. I'm a male born in the 80s, so
Yeah.
it's quite common that you grow up reading all this. I was collecting a lot of magazine about UFO and yeah, this kind of stuff. So of course, like to me, it reminds me something like that.
And it is there. I mean, I also like, I was born in 91, but like I grew up, like my father loves all this like apocalyptic films.
Yeah.
So I grew up like watching them on repeat, like, you know, so, so it's, I don't think it's like, so I'm sure it's there, but it's maybe there more as like a critique almost. Yeah. I don't know.
And Emilia, are you ready for the Peter Pflugler question?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, I'm gonna read it because I wrote it down and I wrote it like a sheet. So knowing that this is your first book, knowing that this is your first book and remembering my after publishing process as complex and complicated, I would like to know how the book changed your relationship to the project, and what's your own relationship to the book.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's Peter. Like,
yeah, maybe that's kind of the answer is, yeah, that to me was honestly almost a little bit of a painful process. Like, not painful in a way, like I loved working with Francesco. Like somehow it was like such a good match. And I really, like, I'm so grateful because, you know, it's also such a good luck in this situation because it's not always the case, but it really, really worked. And my relationship to this book is like, even though it's been around for like, I don't know how many months now, but like at least half year, I still have so much love for it. And of course I see, you know, things that you would do differently, but I still think like, yeah, I do think that these are, I definitely don't have this feeling like sometimes you have like, oh my God, I would like completely change this now or whatever. Like that's completely not the case. I'm still like, I have so much love for this, and it does give me this source of magic when I open it. But what I mean is like, it was quite painful process in a way that I think book is like just as an object, it is very like finite and quite defined. And, you know, once you make something into a book, you don't really change this. I mean, you can change this, but it's still like already like printed there and it has the life of its own. You cannot like fully control this. You don't know where it is on the shelf. And I really struggle with this. Like I to be like completely honest, I think this is my least favorite part of the creative process of like coming to a conclusion. Because I don't know, to me, there's like so much magic, especially in this part where you're like exploring and you can go in like different direction and you can be like, you know, changing titles and like, yeah, generating. I don't know. I feel like I never really struggle with like the blocks of like, oh, I don't know what to do next. It's actually quite the opposite. Like, I think that's maybe more of a problem that I like once I get excited about something, it's like, you know, total, like it just overtakes my life completely. And it's honestly a bit like a love affair. And I think to like end this and like make a book or an exhibition, but with an exhibition I find it much less violent. Like with a book I found this very much like, you know, like this is the finite thing. That was, to me, that was like of course, the beginning of something new, but also like the end of something. So it was like I had to kind of almost grieve, like go for like grieving of this like, you know, process and then make decisions. I also like in general struggle quite a lot with like, that's what like I went on a tarot reading last week, and that's like basically what the tarot reader said to me. He was like, there's so much abundance and there's so much creativity, but you need to learn how to make decisions. Which maybe is a generic, like a tarot thing to say, I don't know. But to me, I was like, oh my God, like this guy knows. He knows. And I think that was completely the case with this book. Like, and then I think how do you say this? I make up for this feeling by trying to find like perfect decisions. Well, of course they don't necessarily exist. So like, I think that's maybe why like the editing process or like, yeah, it took a while. Like it's because I don't know, I think there's so many tiny decisions that like now in like the scope of like this book lying in front of me, I don't even remember, but like, back then they felt like a life and death kind of things that like, oh, this text is on this page and not on this page. Yeah. So it was like this, but then I think once you go through this grieving and like closing, and then the book is like quite literally born, and like something new begins. And this book, I have a feeling now that this book kind of like it exists outside of me. So sometimes I almost find this a little bit difficult, like in this podcast to like, to like almost use my brain to like explain all these decisions, because I feel like I kind of almost like moved on.
Yeah,
and I love this book. I love this book as like, I don't know, like a kind of, I don't know how to compare it to, but like it is my book, and it's like very clear to me that it's my book and I really love it. But yeah, I feel like I already moved on like a little bit. So, and that's also a bit of a sad process, because I think once you work on this, you have like so many revelations, but then kind of like the revelations should maybe leave more in the object itself. And it's almost like an impossible expectation to always like carry these answers, and like always have these answers with you. Like, I think it's important also to like move on. Yeah.
Do you learn something during the process of making this project that can help like new photographer approaching photography right now? Do you have an advice that you can share?
Interesting. To me, like making a book is like a huge lesson about compromise. As in, like, I know that this book is not the most fancy book in the world. Like, I know it doesn't have like fold out pages or like 5 different papers, but that is the decision that was made quite early on. And I stand by this decision. Like, the decision was that like we wanted to make a book that is affordable and that is not like a 60 euro expensive, that like I literally cannot, really afford to buy books like this. We wanted to make a cheap book, but we also wanted to make a book that's like full of magic and that kind of like resembles like a folktale book, or like a magical, kind of like a magical storybook, almost like a night stories book or something like this. And these are the decisions that you make. And then, there's of course like 1,000 different decisions you could make. And maybe, I don't know, maybe like they would definitely result in something else. And maybe for some people, they would be much better decisions. But I don't know, to me, this kind of more like almost like principles, I don't know, they're almost more important or just as important as like the visual kind of aesthetic product. Like, to me, it's important that this book fits into an envelope that I can send it to many people and not like be financially, it doesn't have to cost like 20 euros to send it anywhere. Like, this is really important to me because I know that this book can travel. Yeah. So things like this. And of course, that then maybe doesn't produce the most fancy book in the world, which doesn't maybe, I don't know, win some particular awards. But I think these are super important decisions to make, and they're super important decisions to stand by, especially if, that's something we talked before we started recording. Also, how do you make photography not like self-referential? Because I think that's kind of like in this photographic bubble, it so often becomes this like, like it becomes like this kind of bubble where like photographers buy photography books and go to photography talks. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with this. But I think like, how can we like at least like break out of this a little bit? And how can this, I don't know. And that was always my main ambition. Like, my main ambition was like, how can I like, I don't know, people like my friends who have nothing to do with photography, or like my father who has nothing to do with photography, how can like I make an object that they can take and they can still connect with it, even though, maybe they don't understand what, I don't know, a good photography is or whatever, or don't know anything about editing or something like this. So that's maybe like a book related advice.
No, but it's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. By the way, the book it's really beautiful. The hardcover, the cover is amazing. I think it's really beautiful. It's a small object, but it works really well.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really kind. Yeah, I do love the cover. In the beginning, I was like, wow, that's like a lot of gold.
Yeah, a lot. But again, there is the light and the dark in the cover. It's dark blue and this gold shiny. So I think it works like perfectly with the images inside.
And it does look a bit like a sci-fi Bible kind of. To me, that was my first reaction. And I was like, perfect.
Again, it works really well with me, like from the 80s. It's true. Yeah. And Emilia, I have the last two questions that are just standard questions. Do you have like a music that you suggest to listen watching the book?
So first of all, I listened to a lot of this song, which is called, what is it called? I think it's literally called Stone.
No.
So it's a song by Agnes Obel. Yeah, and it's called Stone.
Perfect.
And that's not an accident, obviously. And then, I listened to a lot of this kind of, how would I define this? Like this kind of big, like obsessive kind of, like the whole, I don't know, maybe I should just give you so there's this song that I loved, and it's called Echoes of Voices by the composer Rebecca Carriord. I can send it to you later. And London Contemporary Orchestra. And I think it's a soundtrack of a film, but I've never seen the film. The film is called Songs of Earth. And I don't know, like in general, like anything kind of like, so the song kind of sounds a little bit like, like there's like loads of echoes coming from different way, but it's also like an orchestra. There's like, it is very, very quite dramatic. Mm-hmm. And I think that like in general, that's kind of the atmosphere that I had with this work. Like it is very dramatic, like, but also it's very simple and very small. So I think like that's anything that kind of like comes on intersection of these two is.
Yeah, I was listening Boards of Canada, watching your book.
Yeah, that works as well.
Really like open and minimalistic.
Exactly.
And the very last question is, do you have a book to suggest us to invite to the podcast? A book, not an author. No, just the author of a book, of course.
I mean, this one book that I'm most obsessed with, that's the thing about me. I don't get so excited about photobooks, to be very honest. Like I'm very specific with this. The only book that I am very much obsessed with, but I don't know how possible this is. Actually, maybe let me think of this one. So there's two books that I would recommend, and I think they're both fantastic. So one is the book that I'm like a huge fan of, but maybe that's almost like, I don't know, I'm such a fangirl of Maya Daniels and her book Gertrude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's like one book that I would always love to listen about. And the other book, so it's the book by this Polish artist, and I've never met her. And she lives in Sweden, and her name is Ela Polkowska, and the book is called Splinter. I have actually never like seen the book I never held it in my hands, but from what I saw online and from what I hear about the book, it looks very interesting, and I would love to hear more about this. So yeah. These will be my two books.
Amazing. My cat just arrived on the table right now.
Oh, so nice.
Yeah, she
You're also
do
a cat person.
a mess almost in all the episode. Great. Yeah,
does your cat get on your keyboard and
a lot.
Finishes?
Can you hear her like purring?
No, I can't.
She's
I
really
have
like
3 cats.
She's really in the microphone right now. Grace, do you want to say something?
Oh, so sweet. No. I have this one cat, and he's always on all my video calls. Like he literally like sits next to me, and he's like in the video call. He's very, very professional. Yeah.
Yeah, mine too.
He's not here today because I'm in my studio, and he stayed at home. But
she's
otherwise,
really sweet.
he would definitely be with us. Yeah.
And Emilia, thank you so
Also quite
much.
intense.
It was a beautiful
so
chat
much.
with you.
Thank you.
And see you
It was
soon somewhere.
really nice. I really love this. I really love these moments to like kind of, let your brain wander. I think that's the most beautiful thing about these talks, and that you can really reflect on things. But
Yeah, also
Thank you.
I found all the time really interesting just to speak about other people, about, for example, my book, because you can discover a lot of new things just speaking with someone else.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, it's super fascinating.
There's one template. I feel like there's different philosophy behind like a different objects, and I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, this is also because photography is quite open. Like you just have that frame, and then there is a lot of space for you to put your mind inside that frame.
Yeah, I think maybe that's why I still love this medium, even though I had like I think, when you like study photography, when you do like something like masters, you will like, I don't know, in my experience and like also watching my friends, like I can see that like almost everyone had like a bit of a crisis or like, with this medium.
Of course.
But somehow like I still genuinely like, I had to go through this process of like, I'm not a photographer, I am a photographer. And now I am in this place where I kind of think, I still like genuinely really like this medium. And I think it is really, I don't know, it has like what you said, like this openness, but also it travels so easily. It's very quite universal and you can communicate with it quite well. I don't know. I find this, for example, I also do ceramics, but I find it's like much easier to communicate with photography than with ceramics for some reason. I don't know. And I love it. And I'm super happy that that my relationship with this medium kind of survived all different turbulations. So
Okay, thanks so much, and see you, I hope, soon somewhere, like in a festival or somewhere. In Arles, maybe.
I hope to see you soon. Yeah, it'll be so nice. I actually have an exhibition in Arles, so that's what I'm super busy with now, and very excited. But
so if the episode is going to be released before Arles, go to see the exhibition of Emilia Martini in Arles. If it's going to be released after, I'm sorry.
then you missed your chance.
Yeah, but okay. I think we have time because Arles is in July, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So probably I don't know. Probably you're going to listen this episode in time for go there. Probably it's today, Arles. You have to go now.
Yeah, go now.
Now.
All right.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Do you want me to turn my video on, or do you just want to go, or?
No, we just say goodbye to everyone and then we can have a chill chat.
Okay.
Out of the record.
Good.
Ciao, everybody.
Good. Bye. Thank you.